2721 The Ship of Theseus. The being drifted in a dark vastness of shattered memories. It was vaguely aware of its own existence, but it did not know what it had been, what it was, what it would become. The cold abyss of Bgok and memories surrounding it seemed boundless. The memories belonged to different creatures, different ages, different worlds. Some were sweet, while some were awful. Some were faint and brittle, while some were clear and sharp as if etched into eternity. The being was lost in the labyrinth of those memories, unable to remember itself. Time and space were meaningless in the absence of awareness, and yet, the being felt a faint certainty. A subtle premonition of its doom. If it failed to find itself soon, it would dissolve into the ocean of memories forever, becoming something else. Something mindless, weak, and destined to cease. How vexing. The being thought that the evanescence of its existence was daunting. It did not possess limbs, or a body, for that matter, nor did it have a concept of possessing them. Not that things like that existed in the cold abyss of recollections. Still, the being wanted to reach for the memories, so it shaped its will into long tendrils and grasped the nearest one. In the next moment, it saw the last battle of a war for the throne of a dying world. The being was a blind woman who perceived the world through the senses of others, walking down the steps of an ancient black tower. With each step, a dull pain radiated from beneath her bloodied blindfold. All around her, countless humans and abominations were preparing to face the final siege of the war, even if its outcome had already been decided. There were too many of them to count, but oddly enough, only a few were individuals. They were those precious few who had yet to succumb to the plague. The remainder were merely vessels of her last ally, the hateful Butcher of the North. Walking out of the ebony tower, the blind woman faced the familiar expanse of the chained island. Out there, separated from the flying island by a vast chasm and the great length of 7 celestial chains, the forces of humanity were arrayed against them. More than 100 saints. Thousands of masters. Countless awakened warriors. Seishan and her sisters were among them. So were the saints of the House of Night, Sky Tide, Roan, even her own fire keepers. And their master, naturally. All of them were ready to attack the ebony tower. The sky below would have served as a natural barrier for most, but Nightwalker was there as well, ready to fold space and deliver the besieging army to her doorstep. The Ivory Island loomed in the distance, as well, and the Night Garden could appear at any moment. Quite a sight, isn't it? She turned her head faintly, acknowledging the man who had spoken to her, the wicked monster with eyes that reflected the world back on itself. The blind woman lingered for a moment, then said indifferently, "I wouldn't know." He laughed. Once the echoes of his laughter were swallowed by the wind, the man added in a mocking tone, "It all could have been avoided if you had let me loose, you know." "Ah, but alas, you and your senseless morality." He paused briefly, then asked, "So, what does defeat taste like?" The blind woman lingered for a long time. When she finally spoke, her dark voice was full of defiance. "I am not defeated yet." The being reeled away. Who were those people? Who were their adversaries, and what were they fighting for? It did not know, but the woman, the blind woman, she felt familiar. What was her name? Looking around, the being reached for another fragment. The tendrils of its will wrapped around it tightly, and it saw a different memory. In that memory, the being was vast and boundless. She wore a nebulous mantle and a mask of polished wood, standing proudly under a lightless sky. The being was surrounded by 6 figures. There was one wrapped in darkness and mist, its frightening black wings obscuring the sky. There was a horrid whisper that hid with the wind, flowing insidiously into her ears. There was a graceful figure woven out of darkness and light, so stunningly gorgeous that she wanted to cry. There was an ethereal presence that felt like the sweetest of illusions, its sweetness hid the very depths of hell. A ghostly silhouette who smelled of sea waves and starlight, her piercing blue eyes as vast as the sky, as dark and unfathomable as the cold embrace of shadow. And another one, whose visage eluded her due to being unmemorable. The Master of Darkness and Mist spoke, "We shall draw a line across all of existence, and separate all that exists. There will only be those who stand beneath our banner, and those who stand against our will. Those who follow the demons and those who believe the lies of the gods. None shall refuse our challenge, none shall escape our call. Not even you, Weaver." She laughed, her elusive voice sounding like a myriad of hopeless prayers. "Who are you to call on us, brother? Who are you to challenge fate? We have heard you call and refuse it. We shall not be a part of the war that you wage." The demon of choice was silent for a moment, then spoke in a voice that contained the infinite weight of the boundless abyss. The line has been drawn, and there is no escaping its judgment. Even by choosing to stay still, you are making a choice. The choice to abandon your siblings and side with the gods. His voice swelled with coldness and fury at the hint of betrayal. Choose wisely, my sibling. You are alone and surrounded. If you choose to betray us, do you think I will let you escape? She looked at the master of darkness and mist from beneath her fearsome mask, then raised her chin arrogantly and lied, as she always did. We are Weaver, the demon of fate. We are the eldest of us, 7 orphans, and the most dreadful. Weaver was the master of knowledge and lies, after all. You spoke of choices, my brother, but why does it seem like you have already made yours? Do you think you can best us? No. You have already lost. Her elusive voice turned cold and penetrating, making the darkness shiver. We are alone because that was our will, and we are surrounded because that is where we wanted to be. Every step you took, every word you spoke, and every thought you conceived of has been formed, foreseen, and dictated by fate. And we are the master of fate, after all. Therefore, we are your master as well. She looked at her brother from beneath the wooden mask and asked coldly. So tell me, demon of choice, who is it that has to choose wisely? ... The being staggered away, gasping for breath even though it did not have lungs and existed in a space alien to the concept of air. No, that memory was too grand, too terrifying, too impossible. The memory was in its possession, somehow, but belonged to someone else. To someone terrifying. Running out of time. Still suffering the aftershocks of witnessing the terrible confrontation, the being desperately extended the tendrils of its will toward a different memory, and that felt fresh and impactful, painted in shades of pain, fear, and profound insight. It belonged to the blind woman again. Yes, this feels right. This feels like me. 2722 Monster of Crete. Stepping out of a luxurious PTV, Cassie inhaled the stale air of NQSC. The city felt emptier than before, but also more anxious than before. People seemed to be moving ever so slightly quicker than they usually would, looking down as if pressed to the ground by the weight of fear. Maybe it was her own anxiety coloring her perception, though. The general population was still unaware of the odd war happening in the shadows of both worlds, after all. The war against Astarion and his spreading influence, which they were struggling to contain. She sighed. Shall I go up with you? Her driver today, ONCE again, was Sid. Even though most of the fire keepers were busy preparing to challenge the third nightmare these days, they still performed their usual duties. Escorting Cassie was one of them, due to the obvious limitations of her flaw. She shook her head. No need. Considering the sensitive nature of the meeting, he won't be happy to see an unfamiliar face. Nefis and Sunny could not visit the waking world too often or for too long, but there was still endless work to be done here. So, Cassie spent her days between the Ivory Island and NQSC, with the latter taking most of her time as of late. Today, she ventured into the city to attend a clandestine meeting with Saint Cor, Wake of Ruin. Usually, there would have been no reason for them to act secretly, but in the current era of distrust and paranoia, numerous things had become difficult. Sid grimaced. What's the point of sending me to protect you if you'll just leave me behind? Cassie turned to face her and smiled. What's the point of sending a master to protect a saint? Leaving her bodyguard behind, she entered an unremarkable building. It was not that she did not trust the fire keepers, it was just that any threat that could pose a hazard to Cassie would be absolutely deadly to her subordinates. She felt reluctant to risk their lives needlessly. Behind the weathered facade of the building hid a luxurious and exclusive club, the kind where only distinguished awakened could attain membership. Cassie was guided to a stylishly decorated lounge where awakened and masters rested in leather chairs, speaking quietly as they leisurely enjoyed expensive alcohol. As she walked across the lounge, she subtly marked a few of them, sharing in their senses. Finally able to see, she secretly let out a relieved sigh. The decor was subdued, but opulent. The mood was lavish, verging on decadent. Cassie's appearance would have caused a stir if not for the fact that she had long learned to blend into the background. Usually, a saint's presence made them stand out, but Cassie's was the opposite. Her presence was simple to overlook and difficult to remember. She approached the bar and took a seat, gesturing to the bartender to pour her a drink, something brewed in the dream realm, and therefore capable of affecting awakened. But not strong enough to affect a saint. Wake of Ruin had not arrived yet, so she had some time to kill. Of course, there were myriad perspectives Cassie was keeping an eye on at all times. So, there was never really true downtime for her. She was focusing on the events happening in Ravenheart when someone took a seat next to her. Cassie did not react, but studied the stranger through the eyes of the bartender. He was not Saint Cor. She did know him, though. The man was an awakened who distinguished himself in Antarctica, ascended, and later went on to pledge his allegiance to the Song domain during the war in Godgrave. Now, he was a free agent, and on several recruitment lists she had compiled. "Can I have what the lady is having?" The man turned, opening his mouth to say something, then froze for a moment. Saint Cassia. Cassie smiled politely. "Nice to meet you." The man remained silent for a while, staring at her with a perplexed expression. People often stared at her, safe in the assumption that she was blind and could not tell. This ascended seemed more surprised than starstruck, though, which was a nice change of pace. Eventually, he nodded and looked away. "It's an honor to meet you." They did not speak for a while after that. Cassie remained still, enjoying her drink in silence. The man did the same. When his glass ran dry, however, he finally found the courage to address her again. His tone sounded friendly enough. "By any chance, do you know the legend of Minotaur?" Cassie lingered for a few moments, then put her glass down and raised her hands. Pulling down her blindfold, she turned to face the man and raised an eyebrow calmly. "Minotaur, the monster." The man smiled. "Right, that's how people perceive him, I guess, a monster whom Theseus, the gallant hero, slayed in the labyrinth to save himself and other sacrificial youths. But actually," his smile turned a little bitter, "the Minotaur was not really a monster. Or at least, he wasn't only a monster." He shook his head with a sigh. "He was a descendant of the sun god and a prince of Crete, born neither human nor a beast. An abomination that no kind welcomed. His father imprisoned him under the palace as a child, and kept him there in the darkness, feeding him human flesh. Every year, 14 youths were sent into the darkness to be devoured by the Minotaur. Well, until Theseus happened to be one of the youths." Cassie nodded. "Thescus slayed the Minotaur and escaped the labyrinth using a string that Ariadne gave him, right?" The man nodded eagerly. "Indeed." He fell silent for a short while, studying Cassie with curiosity. The Minotaur must have been dreadfully hungry, stuck there in the darkness. He was only fed once a year, after all. Perhaps that was why he developed a taste for human flesh. But did he really have to be fed human youths and be remembered as a monster? The man sighed and glanced away, smiling strangely. "Ah, I've always wondered. What would have happened if he were fed monsters instead?" His versus eyes sounded wistful. Cassie remained silent for a few moments, then shrugged. "Wouldn't he have been a cannibal either way?" The man laughed. Oh, what an interesting point of view." He shook his head and wiped the corners of his eyes. "But no, I don't think so. Rather, I think that the Minotaur had never committed such an act. He was neither a human nor a monster. After all, since he belonged to no kind, no one he devoured was his kin. So, what sin did he commit?" Cassie did not respond for a while. Eventually, though, she asked, "Are you speaking from personal experience? Were you awfully hungry, stuck there in the darkness?" The man glanced at her with a friendly smile. "You can't even imagine. You can't even fathom it, young lady. The moon might be a stunning place, but looking down at your planet from up high, all I could think about was how important it had turned out to have a damn string tied around your wrist." 2723 Herald of the Dreamspawn. The words hung in the air, enveloped by a terrifying silence. Cassie remained motionless, as well, doing her best to suppress her body from trembling. Astarion. It would be a lie to say that, for a moment, she did not feel fear. Her thoughts spun, and she sent a stream of mental messages to those caught in the web of her aspect. The man sitting next to her at the bar was a herald of the Dreamspawn, an agent of the insidious foe threatening the very foundations of the human domain. But he wasn't Astarion himself, so she was not in mortal peril yet. Cassie lingered for a few moments, assessing the danger, and came to the conclusion that she had to buy some time above all else. So, instead of reacting strongly, she simply reached for her drink and took a leisurely sip. "Oh, my, you are a new type." The man smiled. "You should have foreseen that people like this one would emerge, no?" He was not wrong. Cassie, Nephis, and Sunny were still determining the full extent of Astarion's powers. There were few reliable sources of information about him. Sadly, the previous sovereigns had been too thorough in erasing all notable mentions of his existence from history. Astarion's aspect was one of mental and spiritual manipulation. He could sense and influence the thoughts and emotions of others, as well as feed on them to grow stronger, and that was only as far as his dormant, awakened, and ascended abilities went, according to Nightwalker. No one, not even Jest, the exiled patriarch of Clan Dagonet, knew what his transcendent form was, let alone what his domain's nature and supreme ability were. They could infer quite a lot, though. Astarion seemed to possess an ability to spread his influence akin to a mimetic virus. Everyone who was exposed to his name was infected by his power, and after that, well, different people were affected differently. Some did not show any symptoms at all, some would begin uttering his name randomly from time to time without even noticing it, helping the virus spread. Then, there were those whose thoughts and actions changed entirely under the influence of the Dreamspawn. Those were his agents in the human world. They were the ones Cassie had been hunting for the last few months. But the man in front of her seemed to represent a new breed. He was not merely under the influence of Astarion's powers, he seemed to be consumed by them completely, falling under complete control of the Eerie Sovereign. Cassie was not even sure if he could still be considered an actual individual, as opposed to a mere extension of the Dreamspawn. An avatar, perhaps. She nodded. I did. Even if my powers of foresight are not what they used to be, I can still make deductions. Astarion was not that different from Cassie, in a sense. If she wanted to, she could burn every single memory from a person's mind, turning it into a blank slate. Then, she could fill that canvas with whatever false memories she wanted to invent, turning them into a marionette, not that she had done something like that yet. He could most likely do the same with a person's feelings and thoughts, just on an entirely different level due to being a supreme. The question was, why had he sent this brainwashed Ascended to find her? There were plenty of reasons to eliminate Cassie. Naturally, her powers could counter Astarion's influence, for one, albeit on a limited scale. But how would a lone master eliminate a saint? Who says that I am alone? As the man smiled, Cassie felt a cold shiver run down her spine. Shishi had taken measures to guard her thoughts, but it seemed that it was all for naught. Astarion still read her like an open book. Both you and every little fly caught in your web, young lady. What an intricate net you have woven, indeed. Flinching once again, Cassie hurriedly cut the connection to most of her marks, except those gathered in the lounge, and therefore serving as her eyes. The man laughed. He studied her with a calm, subtly mocking smile. Do you still hope to buy time, Song of the Fallen? As soon as he said those words, Cassie's perspective shifted. That was because the people she was using to see what was happening inside the lounge, all of them, turned their heads at the same time. They were all looking in the same direction now. They were looking at her. For a split second, all she could see was her own pale face, the golden waves of her hair, and the electric light reflecting in the blue depths of her unseeing eyes. I've walked into a trap. Cassie tensed her muscles, preparing to fight. But before she could move, she suddenly went blind. It was not because someone had erased her mark off the awakened and masters gathered in the lounge, and neither was it because she fell victim to some debilitating ability. No, it was much simpler. It was because all her marks simultaneously closed their eyes, plunging her world into darkness once again. The lounge exploded into a cacophony of sounds. Every single person inside used their superhuman bodies to lunge forward, shattering the furniture and splitting the wooden floor as they barreled in her direction. Before they even reached her, however, Cassie felt a flash of monstrous pain. That was the bartender bringing down an enchanted dagger to nail her hand to the bar and immobilize her. The weapon had to be at least an ascended memory to pierce the flesh of a saint. The man himself must have been quite powerful, too. It was a good thing that Cassie had activated her awakened ability as soon as she entered the lounge. So, the pain she felt was merely a phantom conjured by the promise of an immediate future. She moved her hand, avoiding the bartender's blade, and smashed her glass into his head. At the same time, she slid off her chair and kicked the wrist of Astarion's avatar, preventing him from sliding a cold blade between her ribs. By the time she did, the rest of them were upon her. 2724 Insidious Paradox. Cassie could glimpse a few moments into the future. That ability of hers drew knowledge from a different source than the prophetic visions she used to receive, so it remained unaffected by the severing of the strings of fate which had robbed most diviners of their foresight. That gave her a fatal advantage in battle, even if the rest of her aspect was not at all suited for combat. However, Astarion seemed to be able to read her thoughts without much effort. So, he was aware of all her decisions, and therefore knew what she intended to do in advance. It was quite a bizarre kind of stalemate, to say the least. With both adversaries possessing a perfect understanding of what the opponent would do, the outcome of their confrontation depended on a very primitive set of factors. Cassie's transcendent body was stronger and faster than those of the Aekand ascended warriors attacking her, but they held a numeric advantage. Each of those warriors also possessed a unique aspect of their own. The opulent lounge disintegrated almost in an instant. The lavish furniture turned to splinters, the bar exploded with a deafening roar, and even the walls themselves cracked and crumbled. There was no time to even summon a memory. By the time it would manifest itself into reality, the battle would already be over, one way or another. Cassie dodged the shrapnel and escaped unscathed from the flames, shrugging off hands that reached forward to grab her and stealing the bartender's dagger to use as a weapon. The man himself was unconscious or dying, so he would not be able to dismiss it just yet. But as she brandished the sharp blade, she hesitated. Even if it was for a split second, she froze. What am I supposed to do? The answer was obvious: she had to carve her way out and escape, keeping herself safe until reinforcements arrived. She had sent Sid away with a mental message, afraid that her bodyguard would be killed, but a far more formidable ally was on his way. It would take even him some time to reach her, sadly. Even though cutting down these people to escape was not impossible, they were not really her enemies. They were victims of the Dreamspawn themselves. That was the true horror of the issue they had faced after Astarion's influence began to spread in earnest. The only way to stop its spread was to eliminate those affected by his powers, but they were the very people Cassie, Nephis, and Sunny were trying to protect from him. What an insidious paradox that was. It was a war where they could not kill the enemy soldiers. How did one fight such a war, let alone win it? Cassie only hesitated for the briefest of seconds, but that was enough to give the adversary a dire advantage. Because in the next moment, she felt her body being riddled with wounds. The branches of the near future sprawled in her foresight, each ending with cold steel plunging into her flesh. The pain of these unrealized futures rattled her, but Cassie had long become used to such torment. So, she ignored it and moved. Vile creature. She felt a chill running down her spine. Astarion was not simply commanding the people he subjugated. He made them act against human instinct, completely ignoring the need for self-preservation. They fought in a way that went against familiar logic, throwing their bodies at Cassie almost as if they were begging her to maim and destroy them. It was as if she were being attacked by a herd of ravenous corpses, not people at all. She cut, struck, and kicked them away, trying to avoid delivering mortal wounds as best she could. But that ended up costing her, soon. In the end, only a handful of moments after the battle began, the man who had first approached her grabbed her by the neck, stabbing his knife deep into her abdomen. Cassie shuddered. The pain was no different from the phantom agony she had been enduring, but the knowledge that she was actually being stabbed made it so much more shocking. As she suffered in pain, he grinned, at least she thought he did, blind as she was, because there was a note of mirth in his languid voice. Do you remember, Song of the Fallen? Despite all the help Ariadne had given Theseus, he still abandoned her, leaving her to die all alone. As the man twisted his knife, Cassie gritted her teeth. Go to hell. Feeling hot streams of blood rushing down her body, she turned her head at the sound of his voice and activated her transcendent ability. Entranced by her gaze, Astarion's avatar revealed his mind to her in all its convoluted vastness, his memories, at least. Usually, she would have treated them with a gentle touch or the intricate precision of a seasoned surgeon. But this time, surrounded and seconds away from either being killed or having to slaughter a room of innocent people, she simply ravaged the memories, callously burning away everything she could reach. Somewhere among the numerous memories she destroyed were the memories of Astarion and the knowledge of his name, as well. The man staggered, changing in the face. His grip on her throat weakened, and the hilt of the dagger slipped from his hand. A confused, feeble question reached her ears through the haze of pain. Where, He sounded like a child who suddenly found himself in a scary place, slurring his words and struggling to form a sentence. Cassie pushed the man away and groaned, feeling the sharp blade shift in the ghastly wound. The dagger was sure to be enchanted with some kind of poison, no doubt. But she did not have to worry about that. She was a champion of the human domain, after all. Moments later, her wound would be washed away by the familiar, soothing, radiant white flames. In fact, they should have washed her pain already. Why am I still bleeding? A new voice resounded from the darkness, full of laughter. Why did you expect little Nephis to save you? Another voice joined, full of reproach. Elle expected better of you, young lady. Surely, you did not expect me to come unprepared. Laughter surrounded her from all sides, followed by human voices. Didn't I say it? Ariadne died alone. Well, it was her own fault for putting her trust in a human. Although, between the Minotaur and Theseus, who do you think was more grotesque? Taking a step back, Cassie pressed a hand against her wound. Although she could not see anything, she felt enemies closing on her from all sides. She shared their senses, after all, so she could feel their muscles contracting, adrenaline rushing through their veins, the weight of their weapons pulling their hands down. She could smell the scent of her own blood through their nostrils. Suddenly, Cassie was not sure that she could win this fight. And so, she fled. Or at least attempted to. 2,725 collateral damage. Cassie could not escape the building through the door or through the crumbling walls. That would only make her an easy target, allowing the Dreamspawn's thralls to litter her body with more wounds. Neither could she escape into the dream realm by pulling on her tether, since there was not enough time. Of all the futures she could sense, most ended in a violent sea of pain and agony. The depths of that savage sea were dark and heinous enough to make her blood run cold. Still, there was hope. There always was, after all. Raising a hand, Cassie grasped the blue gemstone set into one of her earrings. The earring was a transcendent memory she had purchased at a high price once, a long time ago, from the armory of Clan Valor. The other was a mundane item created to match it. That memory was a consumable charm that could only be used once, transporting its master to a predetermined point in space across a vast distance. Naturally, a charm like that was a perfect tool for someone wishing to escape danger. However, Cassie had never intended to use it as a means of escape. On the contrary, she had needed it to make sure that she could reach someone as quickly as possible. The anchor of the spatial charm was placed in her childhood bedroom here in NQSC. She had long moved out of her family home, using one of the guest rooms in the Immortal Flame Manor to place her tether instead. Cassie was quite a powerful and esteemed individual now, after all. People like her had to choose the place where they entered the waking world carefully, since it was a point of vulnerability. If somebody wanted to ambush her, attacking in the brief seconds of disorientation after she passed the realm boundary was a solid choice. So, keeping her tether close to her mundane parents would only put them in danger. The world was a dangerous place in and of itself, though. Since they were reluctant to abandon their lives in NQSC and move to the Dream Realm, where Cassie could keep them safer, she needed some insurance in case a nightmare gate opened near her childhood home. So, she had commissioned this memory. Who would have thought that she would have to use it to save herself one day? All Cassie had to do to activate the enchantment was crush the blue gemstone between her fingers, and yet, she hesitated. Does he know about the earring? Astarion seemed to have prepared this ambush quite thoroughly, and considering how well he was informed about the abilities of both Cassie and her allies, he could have stolen the knowledge of this transcendent charm from her mind as well. Even if he had not known about it before, he knew now. Suddenly, Cassie was overcome by an overpowering sense of paranoia. Was it his intention to force her to use it, to begin with? Or, she felt creeping terror flood her mind, making even the pain pulsing through her body seem faint. Or was the paranoia she felt nothing but a thought implanted into her head by Astarion in an attempt to prevent EG from slipping out of his trap? She could not even trust her own thoughts anymore. Suppressing the fear, Cassie gritted her teeth. In any case, the blue gemstone was her last resort. And she was not pushed against the ropes just yet. Grasping the hilt of the dagger protruding from her abdomen, she pulled it out and spun the bloodied blade, catching it tightly in a proper grip. Armed with two daggers now, Cassie closed her eyes and accepted the darkness. She could not see anything, but the darkness was full of sensations. Both the present and the future were brimming with information, readily available for her to peruse. The movements of her enemies, the details of their aspects, the enchantments of the memories they wielded to cut her down. Another ascended unleashed a powerful and eerily sharpened shockwave, slicing the unfortunate man Cassie had robbed of his memories in two. She sidestepped both the shockwave and the torrent of blood, then spun to deflect a rapid sword and cut the wrist tendon of the awakened with her second dagger. A split second later, she evaded another blow and kicked the attacker in the knee, shattering it completely. Then, she took a step back. She was one step closer to the exit now. But that was as far as she managed to go. The man whose wrist she had slashed was incapable of holding the sword now, but he simply threw his body at her like a madman. The woman whose knee she had shattered could not walk anymore, but could crawl and grab her ankle instead. And there were more coming. A plume of flame nearly swallowed Cassie, making her grimace from searing heat. An arrow whistled past, leaving a nick on her neck. Someone slammed into her, sending her staggering back. Still in the throes of pain, Cassie stumbled and fell to the ground. Sharp blades flew toward her body. Cruel hands grabbed her legs, her arms, and her shoulders, pressing her into the ground. In the darkness, Cassie opened her eyes. Enough. She moved, shaking off the people holding her down. Her 2 daggers moved, as well. One sank into a neck, unleashing a flood of blood. The other sank into a heart, making it cease its incessant beating forever. The spell whispered tenderly into her ear. You have slain an awakened human. You have slain an ascended human. Not holding back anymore, Cassie answered the deadly malice of Astarion's thralls with her own. It was a terrible thing, when a saint let their power loose, bodies fell to the floor, and blood washed over the debris. She felt guilt and disgust, knowing that the people she was killing were innocent. But their innocence did not make the gruesome wounds they delivered her less real. She was stabbed again, cut across the back, and struck terribly enough to make her ribs groan. None of the wounds healed, but it did not matter anymore. Because the exit was already near. But what met her when she finally reached it was a mocking voice. Ah, I see now. It seems you've wanted to escape the darkness, too. Cassie's eyes widened. There was no way out in the countless futures she saw anymore, all of them ended in pain. She was caged in a prison of futures, just like the defiled Sybil killed by her had been once. Cassie dropped the daggers and raised her hand. As the door exploded and a powerful shockwave slammed into her, throwing her body back, she grasped the blue gemstone and crushed it. A split second later, the thundering roar of the explosion was replaced by dead silence. 2726 in the flesh. Racked by pain and utterly blind, Cassie slammed into something soft and tumbled to the floor. Laying there, dazed, she tried to shake off her disorientation. The spatial charm. Right. The darkness was full of familiar scents. She was in her childhood bedroom. The thing she had slammed into was her bed. The surface underneath her was the beautifully embroidered rug her dad had bought her a long time ago, after she finished middle school. The soft rug was swiftly absorbing her blood now. Cleaning it was not going to be easy. Come to think of it, her pink bed cover had to be smeared in blood now, too. Cassie felt a pang of panic at showing up home in such a state. Her mom was not going to have a heart attack. No, this was not the time to think about these things. Her call for help would be responded soon, but there was no telling how dire an ambush Astarion had prepared. What if his thralls somehow followed her here? Then, she would have put her parents in danger. A need to move. She had to take them away, to Bastion, before anything else could happen. Her dad would still be at work right now, but her mom had to be home. But before that, Cassie examined her own memories, starting with the moment she received the meeting location from Wake of Ruin. She meticulously compared each to the previous one, looking for the signs of tampering. And there, indeed, although Astarion had not been able to mess with her head significantly, some of her thoughts and emotions seemed to have been pushed in unnatural directions. Her unwillingness to harm the thralls despite the risk to her own life had been strengthened. Her fear of using the spatial charm had been made stronger. There were a few more subtle manipulations, as well. Cassie let out a quiet growl. The eeriest part of it all was that even knowing that those emotions had been forced upon her, she still genuinely felt them. She still believed that her choices had been natural and correct. Groaning, Cassie erased her own memories and replaced them with identical copies that had the tampi-red thoughts and emotions removed. The vile traces of Astarion's manipulations disappeared from her mind, but the knowledge of what had happened remained. All of it took no more than a few seconds. Ignoring the pain in her battered body, she forced herself to stand up. As a whirlwind of ethereal sparks exploded out of her body, Cassie staggered to the door. There was nobody here to share their vision with her, but she knew the layout of her home by heart, so, she could walk swiftly even without being able to see anything. It took her just a few seconds to reach the stairs and stumble to the first floor. Her mom was in the living room, reading a book. Cassie hesitated for a split second, then activated the mark she had placed on her, and finally saw herself. Oh, I did not look good. Her clothes were torn, bloodied, and smeared in soot. Her hair was disheveled, and her blue eyes shone feverishly on her pale face. Her mom looked up and froze, the book falling to the floor. See, Cassie, baby, what happened? Before Cassie could even respond, her mom jumped off the sofa and ran to her, reaching to support her weight. It had the opposite effect. though, because Cassie stumbled and fell to her knees. I'm all right, Mom. It looks worse than it feels. But we'll deal with it later. Right now, we need to leave. She could only see her own face, not her mother's. Still, she knew that it was painted with worry and confusion now. What do you mean, deal with it later? Kasia, you're bleeding. Cassie suppressed a groan and grasped her mom's hands. I'm a saint, Mom. A little bleeding won't kill me. But, we must leave, now. There was a brief moment of stunned silence. Her mom had to be dazed, since it was the first time Cassie spoke in that tone to her. Leave, why? At least she seemed to have understood how serious the situation was. Cassie let out a stifled sigh. I've encountered a bit of a problem. So, just to be safe, we'll need to get you to Bastion for a while. I'll send someone to retrieve Dad soon, too. Just think about it as a vacation, Mom. Please. She was already thinking about the logistics of relocating her parents to the Dream Realm. Their way of life would be disturbed, but Bastion was not a wild frontier city anymore. It was quite developed, albeit not yet on the level of NQSC. There was even electricity there now, so, hopefully, the shock would not be too great. Cassie, don't be silly. Why would we leave our home? Her mom's gentle tone was not at all fitting for how terrible Cassie felt on the inside. It was the same tone she had used to explain elementary things to her daughter as a child, and later as a moody teenager throwing a tantrum. I'll buy us a new home, Mom. But we need to go now. Her mother sighed. No, I just mean, there is no reason to leave. She patted Cassie on the head and leaned forward to hug her, saying gently. Lord Astarion only means well. Cassie froze. No. The fear she had felt in the lounge club suddenly felt like nothing at all, compared to the horror that suddenly flooded her heart. It paralyzed her thoughts completely, making her feel like a clueless child again. What? Her mother patted her on the back. I know you have strong opinions, but he is a wonderful man. Won't it be great if we could all get along? That is what Lord Astarion wants, too. Her embrace was gentle, but firm. In fact, it felt more like a hold than an embrace now. Cassie was not sure that she could escape it without breaking her arms. She raised a shaking hand and traced her mother's face. A soft, familiar smile was playing on the familiar lips, no different from the countless smiles she had seen and felt before. Still smiling, her mother thrust her fingers into Cassie's bleeding wounds, ripping them open. Shish, baby, shish. It's for your own good, sweetheart. Just bear with it a little. It will all be over soon. Her mother was smiling, as if genuinely believing that she was doing her best to help her daughter. Her tone was gentle and kind, no different from how she had soothed Cassie decades ago, when she was a little child. Mom. Cassie's voice trembled. She was still frozen, not knowing what to do. She did not even feel the pain, her thoughts scattered and encased in ice. When did it start? How much of her memories will I have to erase to cleanse her of the Dreamspawn's influence? Can I cleanse them? Cassie was still motionless when the door opened, and she heard the sound of soft footsteps approaching them across the carpet. Her mother looked up, her smile widening. Lord Astarion, oh, thank the gods. Please, hurry, we need help. Cassie shuddered. A tall man had entered her childhood home with a slight, friendly smile illuminating his captivating face. He had to be in his late 40s by now, but he did not look older than 30. His tan skin was smooth and flawless, and his disheveled black hair fell to his shoulders, as if having absorbed the heat of the sun. His eyes were of a stunning amber shade, almost golden, or maybe they were golden, after all, glistening strikingly while reflecting the light. Cassie did not care about how the man looked, however. All she could think about was the overpowering presence that enveloped the world when he appeared, pressing her into the ground. It was as if the world had become a thin film floating on the surface of an endless, infinitely hungry abyss. He was Astarion, the Dreamspawn. The eldest sovereign of humanity, and perhaps the most harrowing. Astarion was in her home, in the flesh. How was he here? Why? As Cassie struggled to come to terms with reality, Astarion reached them and patted her mother on the shoulder. His friendly smile was a little humorous, and a little warm. Why, naturally, I am here, so of course I should help. He gently pushed the woman away and crouched near Cassie, looking at her with a wry expression. His voice was calm. I think we've yet to finish our conversation, young lady. Haven't we? Where were we? Cassie did not move, painfully aware of the fact that she would not be able to fight a supreme Much more importantly, she would not be able to protect her mother if they were to fight. She licked her suddenly dry lips and opened her mouth to speak. But before she could even ask her question, Asterion already answered it, having read it in her mind. What do I want? Well, that should be obvious. He chuckled and placed his hands on her shoulders. As her mother watched them with a relieved expression, the Dreamspawn spoke in a kind tone. I want to eliminate a little problem before it becomes too tedious. I want to cut Ariadne's string. We can't have people escaping the labyrinth before its unfortunate occupant ate his fill, can we? Cassie filled her mind with every song she could think of, drowning her thoughts in a torrent of disjointed lyrics. Asterion grinned. Cute. With that, he raised his hand and brought it to Cassie's face. She felt his fingers brushing across her cheek, almost tenderly. And then, an impossible, devastating pain exploded in her head, making her struggle desperately in his iron, inescapable grip. Cassie screamed. Something wet and hot spilled down her face, and as her mother let out an amazed gasp, Asterion dug out her left eye from its socket with his bare fingers. Tearing it out, he peered into the mesmerizing blue depths of its iris and sighed wistfully. Such pretty eyes. Ah, what a shame. He crushed the bleeding eye in his fist, turned to Cassie, and smiled. It's a pity, really. With that, he reached for her right eye, as well. Before he could reap it out, however, there was a subtle shift in the air, and Asterion whipped around. His hand shot forward, grabbing a flying rapier that had streaked across the room, aimed at the back of his neck. Huh, the slender blade trembled defiantly in his crushing grasp, straining to break free. A moment later, it shattered with a mournful ring, the shards exploding into a whirlwind of sparks. As Cassie cried out, pushing the tall man away, the spell whispered into her ear, "Your echo has been destroyed." No, you weren't really. Before Asterion could finish the sentence, a storm of glistening tendrils suddenly rushed at him like a tide. He frowned slightly, rising to his feet, and easily brushed them away. One of the tendrils wrapped itself around Cassie, though, while another wrapped itself around her mother. As both of them were pulled away, a graceful figure in a flowing red dress revealed itself from the darkness, moving toward the sovereign with an eerie and inhuman smoothness. Her narrow back obscured his menacing figure as Cassie embraced her mother and shielded her. Then, her back met the wall of the house and shattered it. Both of them were thrown into the street, rolling across the pavement in a shower of debris. Cassie tried to protect her mother as best she could, but there was no saving her from minor wounds. We need to run. Her mother tried to resist weakly, but Cassie hoisted her up and rushed away, torrents of blood still streaming down her face. Even blinded by white-hot pain, she knew that the situation was desperate. No, actually, she was in shock, failing to truly comprehend the full extent of what had happened, of what had been done to her. But she knew that they did not have a lot of time left. Cassie only managed to take a few steps when the spell spoke to her again. Yuicho has been destroyed. She staggered. Torment. Behind her, Asterion walked out through the broken wall, holding a head that seemed to have been savagely ripped off the neck in his hand. He raised the red veil with a bloodied finger and looked underneath curiously, then shivered and threw the head away as it dissolved into a torrent of red sparks. Cassie gritted her teeth and continued running. The full force of his will descended upon her, then, making it seem like she had to run for a full minute to move forward just a single meter. Asterion, however, caught up with her without much trouble despite walking at a leisurely pace. That's quite enough, young lady. He pushed her lightly, and she fell to her knees. Cassie took a deep breath, shielded her mom from him, and looked up. One of her eyes was missing, and her deathly pale face was awash in blood. However, there was a vicious smile playing on her lips. She spoke in a hoarse voice. Yes, indeed, that is quite enough. Looking down at her defiant smile from above, the Dreamspawn frowned. Then, his expression changed subtly. And at the same time, a cold wind blew across the empty street. Every shadow around them suddenly seemed infinitely darker, terrifying, and unfathomably deep. A chilling, ferocious killing intent washed over Asterion. In a vast area around them, all the trees suddenly quaked, their leaves withering away and falling to the ground. The grass turned yellow, then rotted away as if stricken by blight. The shadows moved. Asterion sighed. Oh, it seems I wasn't quick enough. He looked down and shook his head. It's this eerie world. I have almost forgotten how suffocating it was, fighting against its laws just to exist. He shook his head again and offered Cassie one last smile. Ah, I'd love to continue, but it's not the right time just yet. It was nice meeting you, young Cassia. Until next time, then. With that, he took a step back. And then, a towering rift of a dream gate sliced the fabric of reality in the heart of NQSC, plummeting down to cut the road in half. As the rift widened, the hungry abyss she had felt before was revealed in its depths in all its harrowing madness, and Cassie let out a quiet whine, trying to crawl away from it against her will. As two soft hands reached for her from the shadows, the memory ended. Perhaps because she finally fainted, having lost too much blood. The being let go of the memory, still feeling the pain etched into it, and pushed it away. It was reeling. Cassie. Song of the Fallen. Yes, that was her name. 2727 Darker Shades. The being remembered its name. She was Cassia, Song of the Fallen. A blind seer who was destined to bear witness to fate. Or at least, she had been. Fate was torn and mutilated, after all. She had mutilated it. Fate had been delivered a mortal wound by the very beings who were supposed to be its heralds, and was now coming undone as the promised future ceased to exist. Song of the Fallen was not a mere witness anymore. She was an architect of what was to come, instead. Destruction, salvation, no matter what end awaited them in the future, she would have built it with her own frail hands. Does that true name fit me, still? The being, Cassia, observed the dark expanse of shattered memories once more. Now that she knew who she had been, she could discern which ones were her own better. But not well enough to gain clarity. She had been a strange existence, it seemed. She was someone who had lived dozens of lives at the same time, experiencing the world through countless conduits of her subtle aspect. Those who were powerful and those who were weak, those who served her and those who did not. Men and women, mundane and awakened, young and old. The memories of their lives were intertwined with those of her own, inseparable. More than that, the memories of the past were intertwined with the memories of the future, one that would not come to pass, at least not anymore. There were memories that she should not have possessed at all, as well. A vast ocean of them, bearing on her with the crushing weight of eternity, memories of the worlds that had perished, of the ancient past that had been erased from the pages of history by the passage of time. What has happened to me? She knew who she had been, but who was she now? How did she end up in this ocean of memories? What was her purpose here? She lingered until a sudden realization struck her. These memories, it's me. They were the building blocks of what had made Cassia who she was. She had been shattered, and now, she had to assemble herself back from these pieces. If the shape she created was true, a woman named Cassia would continue to exist. If not, something else would take her place. If she failed to fit the shards together entirely, her existence would be scattered by the wind. How ironic. It seemed that she had to build the labyrinth first in order to escape it. That man, Astarion, had compared her to Ariadne. But he was wrong. Song of the Fallen was not only Ariadne, the traitorous princess of Crete. She was also Minos, its king. She was also Daedalus, who built the labyrinth at his order. She was also the Minotaur, who was imprisoned in the darkness and forced to eat human meat. She was also Theseus, who killed both the monstrous brother and the naive sister who had given him the life-saving string. That was why failing to kill her on that day was a fatal error that could not be undone. The Dreamspawn was a terrifying foe, so much so that there was hardly a being out there capable of overcoming his insatiable malice. So, what would doom him in the end was his own hunger. Tendrils of will extended toward the sea of memories, grasping dozens of them and pulling them close. She absorbed a tiny, insignificant shard first. The memory might have been slight, but it was clearer and more vivid than almost any other. Its edges were vicious and sharp. In that memory, she was a young, frightened girl laying on cold stone as the sounds of a dark sea washed over her, filling her heart with terror. The world was cruelly dark, devoid of all shapes and colors. She was blind, weak, and useless. She was only alive due to the benevolence of others, and even if she was too frightened to think it, she knew that the cup of their benevolence could run dry at any moment. Her companions were behind her now, having a quiet conversation. The sound of their voices had awakened her, and now, she was failing to fall back asleep. How did you know that I'm a legacy? That was Neph's voice. Nephis was the person who had saved her, back when Cassie was lost in the darkness, shedding tears as she waited for a lone and gruesome death. Even now, hearing her speak made Cassie feel warm. Nephis was like a lone ray of sunlight in the darkness that had shrouded her world, giving her more than mere comfort. Giving her hope. Simple. I heard Castor mention it. He was scolding other sleepers to make them treat you with respect. That voice belonged to Sunny, their new companion. Sunny was largely a stranger, but to Cassie, he was special. That was because sometime during their days at the academy, she had seen a vision of his past. In that vision, he was quietly celebrating his birthday on the day of the winter solstice, hiding from the biting wind and the toxic smog of the outskirts in a rusty shipping container. Because of that vision, he was the only sleeper whose face Cassie knew. She had already been blind by the time she arrived at the academy, so everyone else, even Neffy's, were like disembodied voices that called out to her from the darkness. But Sunny had a face. Hearing him and knowing what he looked like made Cassie feel human again, and so, she cherished his voice a lot. "Can I ask another question?" Cassie gave up her attempts to fall back to sleep and opened her eyes in the darkness, curious to hear what he was going to ask. Sunny spoke in a blunt, indifferent tone. "Why are you burdening yourself with her?" She froze. Neffy seemed to have smiled slightly. "Why wouldn't you?" His response came after a short pause, sounding cold and disgruntled. "No, no, it hurt." She let go of the memory, feeling like its edges had cut her will. It was funny how many things could sometimes depend on a single word. That one word had colored her impression of Sunny in darker shades, and that darker hue in turn shaped much of what would happen beyond that old, lightless memory. Would history have turned out differently if Sunny had given Neff a different answer on that cold night on the forgotten shore? If he had been able to lie, would it have changed for the better or worse? No one knew, and no one would ever come to know. Not even her. 2728 Bygone future. A different memory, this one full of ruin and devastation. A vast, shattered bone plain stretched endlessly under a gray, cloudy sky. Liquid metal rained down on the corpses of numerous men as an abyss of ferocious white flame melted a raging storm of swords into an incandescent hail. Among the corpses, a man in a vermilion cloak and heavy armor had crossed swords with a young woman wreathed in flame. Her own sword had surrendered to his will, as well, so she discarded it and forged herself a blade out of her own soul. A oot of pure light and a ferocious, unquenchable longing. And hatred, of course. The battle had wounded the very foundations of the world, so reality was coming undone around them, revealing the harrowing depths of divine laws hidden beneath. Needless to say, that battle had swallowed up numerous lives, as well. The man had been overbearing and proud, but now, he was battered and covered in gruesome burns. His sword, which had been able to cut concepts once, was turning blunt. His face, which had been handsome before, now resembled a ghastly mask of melted wax. But his steel-gray eyes were still burning. His swordsmanship was precise, transcendent, and sublime. His authority over all things metal was insidious and uncompromising. His will was like a towering iron wall, impregnable and devastating. The young woman was a sage of the sword, as well. She had mastered countless styles and invented more than a few of his own, but today, she was stubbornly clinging to only one. A flowing, unpredictable technique that was both versatile and supremely adaptable. Her father's technique, which the King of Swords knew too well. It did not save him from falling prey to the legacy of broken sword, all the same. In the end, the indestructible steel wall of his will was melted down by the fiery longing. The dreadful edge of his all-severing sword was swallowed by light. And his unfeeling, cold heart was pierced by the blade forged of incinerating hatred. Anvil staggered, grasping the ray of white light that had plunged into his chest. It was of no use, though, because the sharp edge of light simply severed his fingers, making him stagger and fall to his knees. When he raised the ghastly melted candle of his face, however, a twisted smile was playing on what remained of his blackened lips. A ghastly, gargling voice came from the depths of his scorched throat. "Flawless, you are flawless at last." Standing above him in the immaculate brilliance of her merciless white flames, Neffys gazed down with no expression on her inhumanly stunning face. Her lips moved, as if she wanted to respond, but in the end, all she gave him was silence. Did I want to say something? Yes, she remembered that she had. She had wanted to say something, too much, even. More than could ever be expressed with words. She had spent most of her life dreaming of this moment, after all. Longing to kill this fearsome man and burn all the things he had built to ashes. She had wanted to make him remember her father. She had wanted to make him remember her. Every loss, every tear, every wound, every moment of bitter hopelessness that she had endured. She had wanted to make him choke on his failure, his weakness, on his wasted betrayal. But at the moment, she could not really remember why she had wanted to say anything at all. She did not really care about this man, and about the pain she had suffered, either. It was just pain, after all. Looking down at Anvil of Valor, Nephis felt nothing. Her heart was a beautiful, barren wasteland of flame. It was pure of all feelings, all doubts. And all desires, as well. She did not even feel bored, because boredom demanded an inclination to be excited. A bubbling laugh escaped from Anvil's melted face. Flawless. Pursing her lips in distaste, Nephis pulled her radiant blade from his chest and beheaded him with an effortless slash. As she turned away indifferently, the headless body of the former King of Swords fell among the rest of the charred corpses, already catching flame. Her throne stood on these corpses, built with blackened bones. The being that had been Song of the Fallen discarded the memory, sending it drifting into the darkness. She did not need this weathered, useless thing, a glimpse of the future that had already been erased, and would therefore never come to fruition. Of a bygone future that was destined to only ever exist in her memory, forgotten by all. There were many shards like that one around her, full of scenes that were doomed to remain forever unwitnessed. But she was not interested in these relics of a ruined future just yet. Instead, she drew a different memory closer, gazing into its dark depths. In that memory, she was a harrowing being of great vastness once again. She wore the nebulous mantle and the black wooden mask again. She was walking through the shadows, approaching a lone glimmer of light. A deep night was shrouding the world, and a full moon was climbing up the velvet surface of the starlit sky. But there, some distance away, a shimmering white light danced in the darkness, in the center of a small valley that was formed by several hills. A lone human figure sat in front of a small fire there. His head hung low, and his face was obscured by the falling hair. He was naked above the waist, his pale skin covered with dry blood. However, there seemed to be no wounds on the stranger's body, in fact, there was not a single scar on it. On a stone in front of him, a diamond sickle lay, its blade painted crimson. Sensing something, the man inhaled slowly and looked up. His face was young and beautiful, with smooth silken skin, high cheekbones, and exquisite features. Strangely enough, there was a symbol of a crescent moon drawn on his forehead. Not hiding from his gaze, she stepped from the shadows and loomed above him. Her gaze fell down like a dark omen, making the winds fall silent in fright. Despite that, a pleasant and carefree smile suddenly twisted the man's lips. He raised his hand, which had been hidden in the darkness before. In it, a bleeding human heart was grasped tightly, still warm from when he had cut it from his own chest. The beautiful man spoke in a bright and melodious voice. He said, "Hail Weaver, demon of fate, firstborn of the forgotten god." She tilted her head a little. Her answer was even, "Beast of twilight, I am not at all happy to meet you again." The beautiful man looked at her in confusion. "Oh, have I had the dubious pleasure of meeting the great and terrible Weaver before?" He remained silent for a moment, then grinned. "Well, no surprise, I am the most personable and gregarious man in all of the Kingdom of Hope, after all." 2729 Source Element. She studied the smiling man silently, drops of crimson blood falling into the fire from the human heart he held. The fire danced as it licked his hand, scorching it. His silky skin, once smooth and pristine, was swelling with blisters and breaking now, revealing the sizzling flesh beneath. His bright smile never wavered. A vast and hungry madness was hidden in the depths of his glistening gray eyes. She sighed deeply and looked at the dark sky. "We have never met before." With that, a slender arm revealed itself from the nebulous folds of her mantle. Receiving the bleeding heart between two claws, she studied it for a moment, then casually discarded it by throwing it into the fire. Noctis let out a short laugh. His gaze slowly traveled away from Weaver's fierce Omi mask, becoming lost in the dancing flame. After a few moments passed in silence, he spoke in an easy tone. "Hope has been imprisoned for 1,000 years. And humans have enjoyed a golden age for 1,000 years. One cannot help but wonder if there is a connection between the two, prosperity and hopelessness, what a pair." Noctis looked at her again, the smile draining from his stunning face. "They say that we are prospering, but when I journeyed beyond the borders of the Kingdom of Hope, all I saw was strife and desolation. By the moon, I could not tell who was crazier, those funny people dwelling in the distant realms or me." He shook his head and sighed. "It really made me wonder, what had Sun God been thinking when he called upon us to become immortal guardians of hope?" His gaze turned cold and dark. "Say, Weaver, I won't ask you why the Lord of Light imprisoned Hope. But tell me the truth, why didn't he simply kill her? Why create this long and tiresome charade?" She looked down at him for a while, then laughed in 1,000 chilling voices. "You must really be mad. Are you really pleading for truth from the Master of Lies? Sitting by the fire across from the stunning man, she cast a thoughtful gaze at the dark sky. A cold wind rose, and the pale visage of the moon was obscured by clouds. Then, the contours of her mask turned blurry, and it disappeared, revealing nothing. There was nothing but darkness hiding beneath the fearsome mask. Noctis seemed to forget how to breathe, looking into the darkness with trembling eyes. A raspy voice resounded in the silence, making the flames die. Have you heard? My brother, the prince of the underworld, has broken one of the divine tenets. He has encroached on the purview of the gods and created a race of living beings to settle his lightless lands. No one but the gods had been able to create life before, but now, the demon of destiny created life as well. We demons are inclined to perform impossible feats, are we not? Noctis frowned. Why are you telling me this, Weaver? How does that answer my question? She laughed. Because I am known to appreciate deceit, and this is a brilliant lie. Noctis studied her in confusion. What? That Nether created the stone saints? She shook her head, obscured by darkness. No, that the gods can create life. Leaning forward a little, she reached toward the embers and pierced the ashes with her 7 fingers, making sparks fly. No one can create life, beast of twilight. Not even the gods. All they can do is reshape it. That is what Nether has done, as well, to create the stone saints. Paling, Noctis leaned back and asked in a dazed tone. What does that even mean, though? Hey, Weaver, oh, I meant Great Weaver, the demon of fate. As far as lies go, this one is not even that convincing, don't you think, Kappa? From the primordial dragons to the smallest of mice, there are all kinds of creatures populating the vast realms. I really expected better from someone known as the Master of Lies. I was really looking forward to being deviously cheated, fooled, and deceived. Noctis shook his head in reproach. She looked at the dancing sparks. It's the same old story, from before the dawn of time. The 7 gods were born from the flame of desire, just like the 7 demons were born from the forgotten god. You humans were born from stray sparks. How were all the creatures that the gods created born, then? Where did the sparks that gave them life come from? The sparks burned away, their frail warmth swallowed by darkness. She raised her hand from the ashes. All life comes from the flame of desire, in the end. When the gods were creating the first living beings, they merely tore pieces of themselves and used them to breathe life into their creations, just like the forgotten god did to breathe life into us. My brother, the demon of destiny, was the one to fathom that truth, so, he took sparks of his own flame and placed them into his own creations. That was how the stone saints came to be. She looked at Noctis, who was listening to her with an odd fear in his beautiful, mad eyes. That is why Sun God cannot kill hope. That is also why the gods have grown small and feeble over the ages, having spent their flame to populate all the realms. Noctis shivered. Small, feeble. A moment later, a sudden laugh escaped from his lips, vanquishing the ominous silence. And here I was, thinking myself the most arrogant man in all of Kingdom of Hope. Leave it to the infamous demon of fate to call the great gods small. I am ashamed, I am in awe. I have no words, really. He wiped the tears from his eyes. But how does one connect to the other? I still don't understand why Hope has to live. She smiled. What will happen if she dies, beast of twilight? The shadow realm cannot contain us, demons. Death cannot swallow us. He had already tried, and failed. That is because we've never been truly alive, to begin with. We are mere manifestations of a greater flame, and even if we are entirely destroyed, the sparks that give us life will simply return to their source. To the forgotten god. Her laughter made the world cower. And make forgotten god complete. Was that what you wanted to ask me, beast of twilight? Is that why you carved your heart out under the full moon? Noctis looked at her with a pale smile, then inhaled deeply and slowly shook his head. No, not really. He let out a joyless laugh, then grinned. Instead, I wanted to ask you to help me free Hope. 2730 Deal with a demon. Noctis gazed at the demon of fate, his grin shining with a hidden abyss of barely contained madness. His voice, once cheerful and pleasant, turned hoarse and low now. I wanted to ask you our help with slaughtering all the chain lords, breaking the shackles Sun God had forged, and unleashing hope upon the world. I wanted to ask your help with plunging this abominable land into the darkness burning below it, even if it brings all other lands to ruin. I wanted to ask you to help me break the will of the gods. I had to be satisfied with only this little, since the gods themselves cannot be broken. Noctis laughed. In short, I wanted to ask you to help me die. He looked at the diamond sickle that lay on the stone before him, smeared in blood. His grin dimmed slowly, replaced by exhaustion. Well, something like that, anyway. I am tired, Weaver. I am tired of guarding hope, from being driven mad by hope, and from not knowing what my duty is. It was all so clear all those years ago, when the Lord of Light entrusted us with this task. But I've been having doubts. Noctis sighed and looked at her with a pale smile. If he truly wanted us to keep hope shackled, why did he give us the keys to open her chains? His head dropped, and a whisper escaped from his twisted lips. Perhaps what he really wanted was for us to release her, all along. What marvelous cruelty that would have been, don't you think, Weaver? She studied the tired man in front of her for a while. Even I do not presume to know the mind of the gods. Mercy, cruelty, love, indifference, the gods are too vast and too great to contain only one emotion, bear only one desire, and harbor only one intent. She smiled coldly in the darkness. But I can tell you this, beast of twilight. You truly are far too arrogant for a mortal man. Did you really think that 7 transcendent men can contain a demon? Did you really think that 7 human lives are enough to bind the demon of desire? Fool, it was your endless desire to keep her bound that had built the walls of her prison and became her chains, not your unending lives. She leaned forward slightly, studying his pale visage with a hint of a strange, unexplainable emotion. But now you desire for me to help you bring those walls down. You offer me your worthless heart and beg me to help you defy the gods. Do you even know what you are asking of me, beast of twilight? Noctis looked at her with a somber expression. He remained silent for a while, frowned, then grumbled in a hurt tone. Hey, countless women and more than a few men have fathomed the depths of despair while trying fruitlessly to pursue my heart, you know. It might not have struck your fancy, Weaver, but how can you call it worthless? My heart is quite lovely, if I do say so myself. In fact, I dare say it's the loveliest heart in all of. She let out a chilling laugh, making him fall silent. In all of Kingdom of Hope. You only see what your burden allows you to see, beast of twilight. This land, these chains, and the quiet despair of those who naively surrendered their deaths. You only think about what the liberation of hope will mean to you, and only fear the desires that consume mortal men. But my burden is far greater, and therefore, I see far more. I see it all. Noctis smiled crookedly. And what do you see, Weaver? She smiled ominously, obscured by darkness. I see a beginning of the end. The end was inevitable, though. So, her actions did not matter too much. In the end, at best, she would hasten the inevitable instead of becoming the cause of it. That was what she told Noctis, at least. Will you help me, Weaver? I've spent so many years searching for the keys, the ivory knife, the obsidian knife. But they always elude me. So, I am willing to pay any price. You are my only hope now, Weaver. Noctis studied the terrifying darkness, then smiled with mischief. Oh, but then again, you have already given me an answer, haven't you? After all, the great demon of fate would have known my request all along. Therefore, you would not have answered my call only to refuse me. She studied him, as well. That swindler. Her voice was mocking and cold. What can you give me if you're intending to die? Do not think me a fool, beast of twilight. Do not hope that death will let you escape a debt owed to the demon of fate. She pointed at him with a clawed finger. Yes, I shall help you break the chains of hope. Yes, I shall help you defy the will of the gods. But the price I demand is your life, not your death. Even if you long for the mercy of death, I will curse you to live. I will curse you to live, to hope, and to serve me. You and the one in the north both. Noctis shivered. Well, now, wait a minute. But she did not wait. A fearsome black mask covered her face once again as the clouds receded, washing the world in the silver light of the full moon. Letting out a sigh, she looked up, into the harrowing eternity of fate shining above them. The crimson beast of twilight was an eerie existence. He was a man whose fate had been plucked from the great tapestry by a god and twisted in on itself, becoming a seamless loop. So, she reached into the endless infinity of radiant strings and grasped one of them tightly, making all of existence shudder. Wait, what are you? Baring her teeth, she pulled the string of fate down, feeling it bite into her fingers. As drops of golden ichor fell to the ground, she bore the weight of eternity. She moved infinity with nothing but the strength of her arm and the force of her will, changing the shape of existence forever. The ethereal thread she had pulled down entered Noctis, piercing his chest, where a new heart was already beating weakly, now imbued with a new fate. She did not break the will of Sun God. Instead, she simply made it so that what Sun God willed did not matter anymore. Only the will of the demon of fate mattered. By the moon. She laughed. Beast of twilight, do not call upon the moon. That is not your name anymore, and you do not belong to the gods anymore. You belong to me now, you shall only call the name of Weaver.